Hello everyone, we're so glad to have you here for another expert session from Stu Kent. Today, we've got resume master Marc LeFevre, CEO and founder of Promoted. Marc has over 10 years of people management experience and has spent 9 years on both sides of the interviewing table. His real-life experience and practical career knowledge are extensive. He holds a master's degree in business administration and a bachelor's degree in organizational communication. Marc has spent time in aerospace manufacturing as an operations manager, in technology as a sales leader, and in transportation as a human resources director. He owned his own exclusive career consulting practice for 5 years before creating Promoted. Without further ado, I'll pass the time over to Marc.
How does this guy claim that he knows what he's talking about when it comes to resumes? Because you've probably noticed there's not a degree in resume writing. And really, resumes, you guys probably, if I was to ask all of you, your knowledge of resumes, and if I was to ask you where you obtained that knowledge, your answers would be all over the board. All of you have heard things from somebody at some point about something you're supposed to do on your resume, and it's kind of subjective. And so sometimes people are like, man, how can I really take your advice? Like, how do you know what employers really want? And so here's what I want to share with you. These are 5 things I want you to know about me. Right out of the gate, I have been in your shoes. Now, I'm sure that this group that I'm speaking to right now is quite diverse. There might be older, experienced adults that have families and advanced careers going on. There may be some that are right out of high school. Whatever your situation is, I've been there, relatively speaking, okay? I've also failed a lot, and I've had some successes. Right out of my undergrad, I went through this resume building process, and frankly, I was pretty frustrated with it. I got advice from the university that I went to on what I should do and what I shouldn't do, and I put that stuff into practice. Didn't work, and I got kind of frustrated. So that's kind of lit the fire with me about this topic. So when I got started, I was at Honeywell Aerospace working in supply chain analytics, and college students would often reach out to me and they'd say, "Hey, I want to work for Honeywell. Can you send? Can I send you my resume, and can you send it to a hiring manager?" So I'd take their resume and I'd be like, "No, I can't. I can't send your resume on until we fix this. I don't want to attach my name to your name until we kind of get this going." So I started helping people with their resumes for free. And as I was doing that, I started interviewing business leaders, people that hire other people. And I had a couple of simple questions. The first question was, what makes you want to talk to someone based on their resume? If all you have is this piece of paper, this document, what creates that intrigue? And so as I've developed and grown as a resume writing professional, all of the advice, all of the things that we have gathered have come from real world leaders that actually hire people. None of it came from a textbook. None of it came from conventional wisdom that's been the case for 60 years, because guess what? Times change. So I want you to know that. Another one is, so far in my career, I've worked with over 5,000 people. I think my number is like 5,400 at this point. So I've done this a lot. And you name the industry, you name the experience level, I've worked with them. And we've had a lot of success. As a matter of fact, 92% of the people that we work with land interviews. I don't guarantee jobs. Excuse me. Anyone that guarantees you anything in this world, they're probably lying, okay? So, but 92% of our clients, when they work with us, they land an interview. Now, that is not a pitch. This is not a pitch for you to work with my services. It may be a bit out of your price range. We're happy to work with any of you that want to, but this is not a pitch. What I'm telling you is, I just know what I'm talking about. Okay, so I went through this, and these 5 things that I want you to know about me are important things for you to get used to. A lot of us, as we grow up, our parents teach us that we need to be humble and that we shouldn't brag about ourselves. It is really important, especially in the job search, that we get used to bragging about ourselves in an appropriate way and sharing with people what we bring to the table and what our skill sets are, okay? So the purpose of a resume If this was a class and I was in person, I would have you guys throw out your answers. The purpose of a resume, when I ask this when I go speak at universities and other places, the answers are all over the board. But here's what I want you to recognize and remember, okay? These are a couple of statements I want you to remember about resumes. The first one is, the purpose of your resume is to get your face in front of someone else's face. It's the interview, okay? A resume does not land you a job. You land the job because that's so important, okay? The purpose of a resume is to create intrigue, like to just tease the employer just enough to go, man, I got to bring this person in and talk to them. The second one is we've got to eliminate any negative emotions that reader might feel. And we'll talk about what that is. And then also going through the resume process will make you a more confident interviewer and will really increase your ability to speak confidently and clearly and calmly in front of an employer because you've really understood what your skill sets are, okay? So I'm gonna share with you an exercise that I have all of my clients do. I don't care if they are a vice president looking for an executive level position, or if they're right out of high school, just starting, they're looking for an internship in college. I have everybody do this exercise. So however satisfied you are with your current resume, I want you to take a piece of paper. You can do this on Microsoft Excel, Word, or do it by hand on a piece of paper. And I call this thing the value sheet. So what I want you to do is draw a line right down the middle of the paper. On the left side, write out all of the skills that you have that make you employable. Like, why would someone give you money to work for them based off these skills? So start with the hard skills. And by a hard skill, I mean like Microsoft Excel, data analysis, those technical hard skills, business skills that you have, and then get softer as you go on. So like a softer skill would be, emotional intelligence or interpersonal communication, those kind of things. So just write them, list them all on the left side. And this exercise may take a little bit of elbow grease, may take some thought. If you're worried about coming up with a list of skill sets, you might ask a friend or a family member to be like, hey, tell me what my skills are, what I'm good at, and just start doing that, okay? So then on the right side, we're gonna write the context in which that skill was obtained. And this exercise is so helpful to your resume building process, okay? So for example, let's say I put Microsoft Excel. This is my personal example, but I put a date here, 2015. I was at Honeywell and I was placed on a project and I was asked to predict demand on a monthly basis. And I used pivot tables and I used macros to create this tool, and it's still in use, okay? So that is the context of how I developed this skill. Here's a softer skill, conflict management. Then I thought back to 2018 when I had a coworker that didn't follow through on an assignment, and I sat down with them, had a one-on-one conversation, and we resolved it. Okay, so I hope you can see that by going through this exercise, this is what makes you a great interviewer, right? Because you have all these specific skills and you have the context in which you got those. When it comes to bullet points on your resume, all the hard work and the heavy lifting is already done if you do this. So this is a very worthwhile exercise that I make everybody go through. And here, this little sentence down here at the bottom. A great way to do this is to grab a job description for a job that you have interest in, look at the skill sets that they are asking for, and list those if you have them. And speaking of job descriptions, I got to talk about applicant tracking systems, or ATS. This, I think the stat is, I don't know this for sure, but I'm very confident in saying over 80% of applicants are to companies. If you apply for a job online, over 80% of people get caught or rejected by this software called an applicant tracking system. Most companies, there's lots of different types of applicant tracking systems, but basically what it is it's a way for employers to funnel down the number of candidates that they want to interview. So for example, let's say there's a job opening and there's 250 candidates. They have a keyword analysis that goes in the applicant tracking system. So your resume comes in, it compares it against this software and looks for keywords and key phrases. It's going to look for job tenure, it's going to look for experience, it's going to look for education and training, and then also specific skill sets. So the employer will say, I want to look at 45 people, and I misspelled reviewed. So that gives you a good idea of, oh, you're like, oh man, this guy can't do resumes. He misspelled this. I actually just tweaked this right before the presentation, so that's why. Okay, so the employer will say, I want to review 45. So only the top 45 that match get through the ATS. That means everybody else got rejected. And then they'll select maybe 5 for an interview. So do you see how that works? Applicant tracking systems are really important. And I want you all to understand that there is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all resume. I hear this all the time from clients. This is very common. They'll say, hey, I'm kind of frustrated. This is why I want to pay you guys to write my resume, because I wrote my resume and I've applied to like 90 jobs online, and I'm not landing interviews. I get these automated emails that say, thanks for applying, but basically we don't want you. And that's ATS, right? So every time you write a resume and every time you apply, it's really important to take a look at the job description and try to match that up with your resume. Now, now you might be thinking, okay, what's a good match score? How much of my resume needs to match the ATS? A really high match score is actually like 15%, 15%. So you're not copy and pasting the job description in your resume. That's not it. I had somebody one time was thinking they were going to be really sneaky. They copied the job description, the entire job description, pasted it in the margin of their resume, turned the font white, and shrunk it down to like 0.002 font. So the entire job description was in the resume. And when that happened, I was like, that's actually brilliant. But here's the problem, guys. ATS has a boundary too. So it'll say, give me everybody from like 15 to 30%. So if it's over 30%, it's clear that someone's kind of cheating the system. So before you get any crazy ideas, that's something to think about. Okay, so if you have questions about ATS, write those down. We'll come back to those in a little bit. Okay, now let's start putting the actual resume together. Let's say you got one. I think most people suffer from over-analyzing this, okay? Let's not overthink it. Let's be really, really simple, okay? So here's 2 things to think about. The ATS should be able to quickly read what you have. So that is the amount of text you have and the format. And then a human should be able to really easily scan down your resume and not have negative emotions as they view this document. So it shouldn't be overwhelming, but it shouldn't be underwhelming, right? It should just kind of fit right there in that sweet spot. So the order, here's a basic rule of thumb. Now, this is very subject to the professional. So if you're listening to this and you have 20 years of experience, this may be a little bit out of order for what you would do. But for the most part, for a college student age person who's looking to get an internship, get that entry-level job, this is a really good way to look at the order of your resume. So education, training, and certifications, skill sets, and experience, okay? So we're looking at the job description and we're trying to satisfy those basic requirements as quickly as possible, okay? So what should be at the very, very top of your resume? Let's go over this. Okay, this is an example of what I would put on the top of a resume, okay? So I want to kind of pick this apart because some of you might be going, why are we going over this super simple thing? But there's a lot here to talk about. Number one, I know that your parents gave you a middle name very lovingly and you just love your middle name. No one cares about it. Now, I don't mean to be rude, but when you apply to a job, no one's going to be like, my middle name is Lyle. They're not going to call me up and be like, Marc, Lyle LeFevre, we're excited to interview you. They just want to know what to call me, okay? So don't put your middle name, don't overcomplicate it. Okay, how do they get a hold of you? Phone number, email address. That's that simple, super simple. Let's talk about email addresses. If you created a Gmail account when you were 13 and your Gmail and your email handle is like oneleggedturtle@gmail.com, you might consider getting a more professional email, okay? Because if you see some goofy thing on a resume, you can just imagine the negative emotion that might create for an employer, okay? You don't need your home address, and in some cases, you don't even need a state. You want to be careful here. If you're applying, let's say you live in Salt Lake and you're applying for a job that's in California, and you have Salt Lake on your resume, they might go, oh man, we're gonna have to relocate this person. That's a whole different ballgame than if they don't know where you live. Okay, so we can answer questions about that, but that's something to think about. You don't need your home address. They're not going to come to your house. They're not going to send you mail, so don't put your home address on an email. And then also, really important, put your LinkedIn profile up there. We're going to talk about LinkedIn in a second. And then if you've got a URL for a personal website, that would be really helpful as well. Okay, so that's how you get started. Now, all of you, if I was to take a look at all of your resumes, some of you, and I would submit that even the majority of you, have an objective on the top of your resume. Now, I believe that an objective is a scourge, a disease that has infected resumes for years and years and years. And most people have objectives because that is the old way of writing resumes. Most universities still coach their students to put an objective on a resume. So let's just think about the logic here. So I'm putting up an example of an objective. My objective is to obtain a job in the field of medical sales to add value to any organization I find myself in. I desire to work in an organization that aligns with my values, hard work, blah, blah, blah. I believe my skill sets are awesome. Okay, I'm going to be a value to your company. Okay, like duh. We know this. What you basically said is, I want a job and I'm great. Anybody can say that. And as a matter of fact, the rest of your resume says that. So this is very redundant. You don't need to say that you want a job on your resume. When you apply to the job, that's going to clue the employer into the fact that you want a job. So if you have an objective on your resume, scratch it. Don't show anybody. Let's just pretend like it never happened. Okay. If you have questions about objectives, we can talk about those. Now, what about a summary on the top of your resume? This is an interesting question. Is a summary 100% necessary? No, it's not. But in some cases, a summary can be helpful if it like creates the intrigue. So I want you to take a look at this summary and the intrigue that it might create for an employer. I'm an accomplished professional with over 12 years of tax accounting experience. Okay, 12 years, that satisfies a job requirement. Tax accounting, that's going to satisfy a job requirement. I completed my bachelor's and master's degree. Job requirement satisfied. While working full-time at KPMG. Okay, there's another previous employer that is a big employer that could really be good. I'm highly skilled in all facets of financial accounting, financial statements, legal detail. Those are skill sets that are going to be found on the job description. So the basic qualifications are met, skills are listed, there's a clear direction that's articulated. So a summary can be very, very helpful if it's written correctly. Now, when I would put a summary on a resume would be like a professional that's got like 20 plus years of experience. And the resume is going to go longer than one page. I guarantee one of you is going to ask about page length on resumes and like, does it have to be one page? Does it have to be two? What's the deal there? Here's my really simple answer. No one's going to print your resume anymore. It's very unlikely that they would print your resume. So the old way of printing resumes, you'd always want it one page because it's kind of a pain for someone to have to print 2 pages, right? But now that it's all electronic, one page is always a good rule of thumb. Less is more, right? If you can fit your resume onto one page and it's clear, do it. But if you've got a ton of experience and by deleting stuff to get on one page, you're like lessening your horsepower, let's get that stuff onto page 2. If page 2 is really relevant, then it's totally fine. Okay, so here's why I'm saying this. With somebody that has a lot of experience, if their resume is going to go on to 2 pages, I'll typically put a quick summary at the top of the resume to like, if the employer only read that, would it create that intrigue? So that's the idea there with the summary. Okay, hopefully I've beat that horse to death here. Okay, all right. So let's look at the structure. Okay, this is a good way to format a resume. Why don't you take a look at this? Is how I would articulate education and certifications on a resume. We're trying to keep everything on the same line, and we're trying to create a a quick flow from left to right. Okay, we don't want people to have to guess anything here. So you can see the master's degree. Where did you get it? Washington State University. What year? 2016. Super simple. Okay, you're going to notice a GPA up there. GPA, I'm sure some of you are going to ask whether or not you should put a GPA on there. I put 3.7 on there because that's kind of my rule of thumb. If you got a 3.7 or above, I think it's great to put a GPA on your resume. If not, yeah, you could probably leave it off, unless you are applying to medical school, some engineering programs, some master's degrees will require you to articulate your GPA. You can probably do that in the application, so you may not even have to put it on a resume. If you're proud of your resume, of your GPA, it will only help you. If you're not really proud of it, then leave it off. I'll tell you, so I had a 3.5 coming out of my undergrad at BYU, Idaho. I got really involved on campus, and I did not put 100% of my effort into the classroom. And so I never put a GPA on my resume ever. And guess how many times I've been asked about it? 0. Never been asked. Okay? So now, skill sets. How do we articulate skill sets? This is one way to articulate these. I'm going to show you a couple different ways to do this. You're going to notice that it's just kind of lined out here with these little vertical spacer lines. What I'm doing is I'm looking at the job description and articulating all the stuff that's found on the job description right in my resume. So this is pretty clear for a human to look through, but it's also really, really good for the ATS. The ATS can read this really clearly. And I'm going to show you some examples of what the skill set section might look like on an actual resume as it's all put into context. So don't worry too much about that right now. Okay, so experience. Okay, let's talk about this. Writing the bullet points. So a little while ago, I posted on LinkedIn. I actually put a poll out there, and I just wanted to know like what people think about writing bullet. Like what's the hardest part about writing a resume? And it's the bullet points every time. Okay, so I'm gonna show this really simple example. This is somebody that was a grocery bagger at Albertsons grocery store, and here's the dates. By the way I've formatted this is how you should format it. It's so clear, so easy, okay? Now, if you take a look at these bullet points, you might ask yourself, is there anything wrong with this? Would you change this? Now, as you read these bullet points, checked out customers and bagged groceries, answered questions, ensure the customers are able to get their groceries. Okay. Anybody can do this. There is nothing unique about this. So take a look at your resume and your bullet points, and if someone else could easily come into your role and do what you have written on your resume, it's probably time to start thinking about changing this. Your bullet points should articulate value, achievements, and results. They are not a regurgitation of your job description. Okay, that's really important. So if you want to remember a phrase, it's show, not tell. Show me what you did in your job. Don't just tell me what you did in your job. So we'll take Mr. Grocery Bagger here. This is an actual client that I worked with, and this is what we decided to put on his resume. So I started asking him some questions, and you can ask yourself this question too. So I'm like, great, you checked out groceries, you checked out customers, and you bagged groceries. I started asking him, how many people do you think you service on a daily basis? And he's like, I think I probably do 65. And I'm like, okay, do you help them solve problems and figure things out? Absolutely. So can I say that you resolve problems for 65 people on a daily basis? Yeah, that sounds way better. Okay. And then as we got thinking, he's like, actually, I did create this like coupon communication plan to get promotions and deals out to customers, and it increased sales. And I was like, why is that not on your resume? Oh my gosh. And then I asked him, did you have any quality problems? Did anyone complain about your work with them? And he's like, no. And I was like, how long did you work there? 2 years. So we crunched a few numbers, 0 customer complaints in 2 years, working with over 3,000 customers. So the reason I'm walking you through this is because quantification will help you articulate value and will help you articulate specific achievements and results. Okay, so articulating the bullet points can be really difficult, but it might be good. A good way to start is actually to grab the job description, right? If you've got a job description for your previous role, start with that, but then look at it and see where your achievements fit within the job description, what kind of skill sets you articulated on a regular basis. Okay, so as you're going to see here, I start every sentence with what I call a value word. Every sentence is like powerful, resolved, created, zero. Those words create intrigue, and they kind of pull in the reader. I'm using specifics, I'm using results, and it's not a job description. Okay, so that's that. Let's move on. Let's talk about fonts. Everybody likes to talk about fonts. What's the best font for a resume? I'm going to give you my top 3. I love Garamond, Open Sans, and Calibri. These are my 3 favorites. They're not overly used. They're very clear and very professional. As a matter of fact, you'll notice that I'm using Garamond on this. I use Garamond most of the time, but sometimes people like a more sans font, like Open Sans. It's a little bit better. These are the fonts that I use a lot. A lot of other people will use Times New Roman or Arial. You can't go wrong with them, but they get overused, and frankly, they're kind of boring. Now, some of you are going to laugh. I am not joking. I have seen resumes with the following fonts. Comic Sans. If you do not want the job, use Comic Sans. If you want to feel like you're stuck in the past in ancient Egypt, use Papyrus. If you're applying for a job at NASCAR, use Eris. Or a handwriting font kind of defeats the purpose of typing your resume. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of resumes that are kind of formatted the way we would typically do this, okay? So you'll notice how clear this is laid out. We try to keep everything on the same line. So job title first, followed by organization and the company, followed by the date there. You can see how clearly this is laid out. Here's another example of something that's a little bit deeper. Now, you might look at this resume right out of the gate and you go, man, there's a lot of text on there. The reason this resume is formatted the way it is because we did a lot of research. This particular client needed to say very specific things on the resume given the job description. And you'll notice, I want you to take a look at the skill set section. I have put skill sets in buckets. This is helpful. So a lot of times the buckets could be like your hard skills, systems, softwares, Microsoft Excel. If you're a data person, you might have Python or SQL or something like that. And then you might have your business and communication skills, something a little bit, something different. And this just enables the reader to understand what they're bringing to the table. And you'll notice, given this person's job tenure, education is down at the bottom because their experience really trumps that education. But we need to make sure that we're saying education, that we're articulating education on there. Here's another thing about education. You'll notice what it says down here, Bachelor of Science. It's not BS. You want to B period, S period. Try to stay away from those shortened acronyms on your resume. Try to put Bachelor of or Master of and then your degree. That helps the ATS read it. And by using those acronyms, sometimes you get in trouble and the ATS will not see that you've got a particular degree, which is a bummer if that happens to you. Okay, here's another resume. I wanted to show you this one because this goes on to 2 pages. And some of you might be going, oh my gosh, I can't believe that went on to 2 pages. But here's the deal. Everything on page 2 is super relevant to the job description. This individual, we got them a fantastic promotion at their big aerospace company. And this worked out pretty well. So they wanted to know that they were a mechanical engineer right out of the gate. So we put education at the top on this one. And then you can see experience there. Some of you might be wondering how many bullet points are appropriate on a resume. Really, this is about, so the second one, the tool engineer level 2 one, that's about the maximum number of bullet points. Any more than this, it just gets too much. So I think for most people, I try to keep the bullet points anywhere from 3 to 5 bullet points. I think that's probably enough. When you get beyond that, if it's a very specific project or you just can't survive without putting that bullet point on there, that's okay. But just think really critically about your bullet points and be like, okay, does this create the intrigue to interview me, or is this bullet point something that maybe I could bring up in an interview, but I don't need to put it on my resume? So that may have answered a couple of questions there as well. Okay. All right. So here's another one. Some of you have probably seen resumes that are graphically formatted. So I put this one together just as an example to show you. This looks pretty cool. It really does. And if it's going directly into the hands of an interviewer, this is perfect, right? It's really cool to read and really easy, but the ATS will really struggle with this resume. It's kind of funny. We put a man on the moon in the 60s, but today in 2022, we still struggle with ATSs that can read a PDF clearly. And so this kind of format, while it's kind of boring and not super sexy, it gets you through, and it's pretty clean, and an employer can see what they're looking for quite easily. So if you've got a resume like this, that's great. Just be aware that the ATS sometimes will really struggle. You're going to see a picture on there. A lot of people ask us, do I need to put a picture on my resume? The answer is no, you don't need to. If you want to, that's great. But really, I think for the most part, it's kind of a waste of space. Okay, and then color too. If you want to put color on your resume, make sure that it's a dark professional color. So any shade of gray, blue. I would stay away from like yellow. Maybe a dark green would work, but just make sure, just think about who's going to read that and can they see it clearly. If it's going to cause a negative emotion, you might want to leave it off.